Hello everyone, I'm Auntie Kara, but this video is not for kids. This is another edition of book reviews for grown-ups who love fairy tales. Today I'm going to be talking about Wintersmith by Terry Prachet. It is the third book in the Tiffany Aching series. If you want to know about the first book, We Free Men, I have another video I will link in the comments, so you can do that one first if you like, or you can just do this one either way. This was my favorite book in the series. I really enjoyed this one. It's kind of the coming of age book for Tiffany, so I'll give a little bit of background. You can always go look at the other video if you want more information about her younger years and kind of how the story gets set up. But Tiffany Aching is a witch whose grandmother was a witch and a sheep farmer, and she comes from a long line of sheep farmers in a sheep farmer land called the Chalk. And Tiffany, when the story starts, she's still quite young, but she goes on this amazing adventure to save her brother, and it's just fabulous, armed with only her wits and her fairy friends and her trusty cast iron frying pan to help her. She's a great character. And so the second book is then called Hatful of Sky, and that deals with Tiffany going to magic school and learning the craft of the witches and all the old witches that have come before her. So this book is more of when Tiffany is starting to, become a teenager, and it's a really interesting take on that coming of age tale, mainly because the love interest isn't human. So it's the Wintersmith. And the way this kind of gets set up is Tiffany goes with one of the older witches, actually a few of the older witches, to this ritual dance that is meant to welcome in the winter and to honor the Wintersmith, who is an elemental spirit that basically makes winter happen. And during the dance, there is an empty spot that is meant for him, but Tiffany doesn't know this, and she has this instinct that just kind of makes her feet jump into the dance, even when she's been told not to, and she jumps into his spot, and that's something no one has ever done before, so it really captures his attention. And she begins to be courted by the Wintersmith. So, like, the spirit of winter itself is courting her and has fallen in love with her. What I really love about this, though, is it's definitely an unrequited romance. So in terms of lessons about consent and lessons about, where someone's affections and displays of affections stops being romantic and starts being creepy and harassing and all of that stuff, it's a really good exploration into that whole transition time and into that whole world, and to, trying to figure out when too much is too much. So I'm not really going to tell you how it ends up. I'm going to read a few sections for you. But I really love this one. Like I said, it was my favorite in the series. I couldn't put it down. I love the whole series very much, but I do find the other books, about 3/4 of the way through, there's a bit of a lull in the writing style and the way the story is propelling forward. So all the other books, I came to a point about 3/4 of the way through where I kind of had to push to keep going. And that definitely wasn't the case with this one. I just wanted to read right to the end, and it was really exciting and interesting, and the story flowed the whole time. So I'm going to read you a few passages today. Let's see. The first one is a bit of a description about cackling and what it means to witches in this universe. If you don't know Terry Prachet, he has written so many books, so many books, and I believe his daughter is continuing on Passion. But the Discworld books are fabulous, and it's their whole world and have their whole own mythology. So if you're someone that loves magic and loves, stories that have a really good message for all people, they're really accessible, they're really aware, and they give a lot of good lessons that are applicable to our world as well. So yeah, definitely go check out the other Discworld books if you are interested. I've only read the Tiffany Aching series, which is a series he wrote inspired by his own daughter. Um, but I do want to read more. I think on my yearly reading list next year, I'm gonna have to put another one, maybe Equal Rights in there because I've had a few people recommend it to me. So if I do, I'll be sure to do a video. But for now, let's dive into the Wintersmith. All right. Witching was turning out to be mostly hard work and really short on magic of the zap, glingle, glingle, glingle variety. There was no school and nothing that was exactly like a lesson, but it wasn't wise to try to learn witching all by yourself, especially if you had natural talent. If you got it wrong, you could go from ignorant to cackling in a week. When you got right down to it, it was all about cackling. No one ever talked about this, though. Witches said things like, you can never be too old, too skinny, or too warty, but they never mentioned cackling. Not properly. They watched out for it, though, all the time. It was all too easy to become a cackler. Most witches lived by themselves, cat optional, and might go for weeks without ever seeing another witch. In those times, when people hated witches, they were often accused of talking to their cats. Of course they talked to their cats. After 3 weeks without an intelligent conversation that wasn't about cows, you'd talk to the wall. And that was an early sign of cackling. Cackling to a witch didn't just mean nasty laughter. It meant your mind drifted away from its anchor. It meant you losing your grip. It meant loneliness and hard work and responsibility and other people's problems driving you crazy a little bit at a time. Each bit so small that you hardly notice it until you thought it was normal to stop washing and wear a kettle on your head. It meant you thinking that the fact you knew more than anyone else in your village made you better than them. It meant thinking that right and wrong were negotiable, and in the end, it meant you going to the dark, as the witches said. And that was a bad road. At the end of that road were poisonous spinning wheels and gingerbread cottages. What stopped this was the habit of visiting. Witches visited other witches all the time, sometimes traveling quite a long way for a cup of tea and a bun. Partly this was for gossip, of course, because witches love gossip, especially if it's more exciting than truthful. But mostly it was to keep an eye on one another. All right. So, the next section I'm going to do is the dance itself, where Tiffany meets the Wintersmith. The sound of the drums filled her head now, making her feel dizzy. They were wrong. There was something wrong. And then she remembered the seventh dancer, the one they called the Fool. He was generally a small man, wearing a battered top hat and bright rags sewn all over his clothes. Mostly he wandered around holding out the hat and grinning at people until they gave him money for beer. But sometimes he'd put the hat down and whirl off into the dancers. You'd expect there to be a massive collision of arms and legs, but it never happened. Drumping and twirling among the sweating men, he always managed to be where the other dancers weren't. The world was moving around her. She blinked. The drums in her head were like thunder now, and there was one beat as deep as oceans. Miss Treason was forgotten, so were the strange, mysterious crowd. Now there was only the dance itself. It twisted in the air like a living thing, but there was space in it, moving around. It was where she should be. She knew it. Miss Treason had said no, but that had been a long time ago, and how could Miss Treason understand? How could she know? When did she last dance? The dance was in Tiffany's bones now, calling to her. 6 dancers were not enough. She ran forward and jumped into the dance. The eyes of the dancing men glared at her as she skipped and danced between them, always being where they weren't. The drums had her feet, and they went where the beat sent them. And then there was someone else there. It was like the feeling of someone behind her, but it was also the feeling of someone in front of her and beside her and above her and below her all at once. The dancers froze, but the world spun. The men were just black shadows, darker outlines in the darkness. The drum beats stopped, and there was one long moment as Tiffany turned gently and silently, arms out, feet not touching the ground. Her face turned towards the stars that were as cold as ice and sharp as needles. It felt wonderful. A voice said, "Who are you?" It had an echo, or perhaps two people had said it at almost the same time. The beat came back suddenly, and 6 men crashed into her. And that's where all the chaos begins. All right. So, the third and final section I'm going to read to you is one of the offerings the Wintersmith gives to Tiffany to give you a sense of, where romantic becomes creepy. They say that no two snowflakes are alike. How could they know something like that? Oh, they think they're so smart. I've always wanted to catch them out, and I have done it. Go outside now and look at the snow. Look at the snow, mystic. Every flake the same. Tiffany heard the knocking and opened the tiny bedroom window with difficulty. Snow had built up on the sill, soft and fluffy. "We did not want to wake ye," said Rob Anybody, "but wee Billy said you ought to see this." Tiffany yawned. "What am I looking for?" she muttered. Catch some yawn flakes," said Rob. "No, not on your hand. They'll melt too soon." In the gloom, Tiffany felt around for her diary. It wasn't there. She looked on the floor in case she'd knocked it off. Then a match flared as Rob Anybody lit a candle, and there was the diary, looking as though it had always been there, but she noticed also being suspiciously cold to the touch. Rob looked innocent, a sure sign of guilt. Tiffany saved the questions for later and poked the diary out of the window. Flakes settled on it, and she lifted it closer to her eyes. They looked just like any ordinary. She began and then stopped, and then said, "Oh no, this must be a trick." "Aye, well, you could call it that," said Rob, "but it's his trick you can." Tiffany stared at the falling flakes, drifting in the light of the candle. Every one of them was Tiffany aching. A little, frozen, sparkling Tiffany aching. Downstairs, Miss Treason burst out laughing. All right. So please read this book. It is fabulous. I promise it will give you a smile. If you do, feel free to comment and let me know how you liked it, or if there's anything else you would like me to read, please do. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you guys again next time. See you later.